Welcome back. This is center stage at Beth Israel, the West Temple. I'm so honored to have our friend, our true friend, Julian Ross with us today. We're going to be talking about you and your life and your music, and we only get to see you stand here, you know, playing how well you play, and I'm glad that you said yes without delay to coming in and sitting down and letting us learn more about you and your family and your instrument and what makes you tick. So thank you for being here.
Well, thanks. It's really fun. It's great.
So when a person in music becomes a DMA, what is the DMA?
DMA, it stands for doesn't mean anything. It means you just outlasted your peers in school.
And specifically though for you, seriously,
it means Doctor of Musical Arts.
And how long does it take you after a 4-year degree to get it?
Well, I got a 4-year undergraduate, then master's degree, which took 2 years, although I stayed for 3. And then years later, I went back to school after already having a tenured college professor position and spent 3 years at Rutgers University and got a doctorate.
So I know you were born in St. Louis.
Yes.
On the Illinois side of the river.
Exactly, right.
And where was your undergraduate degree?
Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati.
Oh, I just came back from there an hour ago.
Oh, okay.
And then where was your master's?
Eastman School of Music.
And that's in Rochester, New York?
In Rochester, New York.
And you couldn't get there today because of the snow, certainly.
Probably not.
And then where did you go after Eastman?
Right after Eastman, I went to Boston. Well, there's always long stories, but I left Eastman. I started a doctorate, actually, at Eastman after I finished my master's. But I wasn't spending a whole lot of time there, and we came to the conclusion that maybe I should do something else for a while. So I had a summer festival in Sarasota, Florida, that I was going to, and I met a violinist there named Eric Rosenbluth, wonderful, very well-known violinist. And I didn't have a next thing to do, actually, after that festival in Sarasota. And Eric Rosenbluth said, well, why don't you come to Vermont to the Yellow Barn Festival? So I packed up my stuff and came up to the Yellow Barn Festival, and it's a wonderful music festival.
At a Yellow Barn?
It is in a yellow barn. It completely was in those days, in Putney, Vermont. And it was run by a person named David Wells, a cellist, very respected cellist. And I ended up spending 11 summers there. And during that first summer there, it turned out there was an opportunity to play in a string quartet at the New England Conservatory. And I went and auditioned for those guys, and they invited me to join. And so I moved to Boston.
a great city to live in, right?
It was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Pretty tough to freelance as a musician there. It's very crowded with musicians, but it was okay.
And Berkeley is there, of course.
Yeah, Berkeley School of Music and New England Conservatory and Boston University and Boston Conservatory and Longy School. Yeah.
And was your area of expertise always one instrument?
It was always violin, yeah.
Always violin.
Yeah, once I started playing violin, that was it.
So take us back. Were you 5, 6, 7, younger than that even?
No, I was a late starter on the violin. I played the piano when I was young. I actually don't know exactly how young I was.
Was it musical house?
Yes, yeah. My father was a very, very good musician. He was an attorney and a labor arbitrator while we were kids, but his dream had always been to be a musician.
And that makes it easier, doesn't it?
Sure.
When one of the parents has the passion.
Sure.
So did he push that passion upon you, or did it just happen to? How did that work?
There was no pressure. No pressure to practice. No pressure for anything. But they gave me piano lessons, and I don't remember much about it because I was a little kid. And then eventually I took trumpet lessons because my dad was a trumpet player, and at some point, this friend of my dad's who was giving me trumpet lessons called him and said, you know, he's really bad. So maybe you shouldn't do that anymore. Huh. So then I switched to violin.
Did you switch because there had to be a musical instrument in your hands? You had the passion even at that young age?
Oh, I don't know. No.
No.
No, I switched to violin because there was this other really cool kid who played the violin. And he was like the coolest kid. And he kind of told me I ought to play the violin. And his name is James Cook. He's now in the Boston Symphony. He's been there for 30 years. Yeah. So that was why. So they found me a violin teacher and took violin lessons.
So when you're young and taking violin lessons, fair to state that you missed out on other things even at a young age?
I don't remember missing out on anything.
Wonderful. Some kids, as an example, their parents think they should be a soccer player.
Yeah.
So they play soccer 11 and a half months of the year. And the violin, I assume, was an all year round thing.
It was year round, but I was in the Corey League baseball team and had fun doing that, and I was in the Cub Scouts, and I did all kinds of stuff as a kid. It wasn't really focused on music at all.
So your brother's a lawyer, your dad's a lawyer.
Yeah.
And is that one of the reasons you stayed away from the law, or just went to music and stayed there?
It at a certain point, it became almost inevitable that I was going to try and become a musician.
Is that right?
Yeah, but it was late. It was late. When I started college, I went to school thinking, well, it's going to be really fun to major in music for a little while, but I'll probably end up back in school doing something else. Maybe eventually become a lawyer. I didn't know.
So you were at UC as a music major?
Yes.
Not thinking this is my career.
I didn't really think so. I thought I'd be a double major. I thought I was going to double major in economics and I'd do other things.
Somebody here knows a little about economics. That gentleman behind the camera.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I didn't learn anything much about economics.
So explain that process of thinking. Did it first come that you enjoyed it more, or did it first come that I can do this, and maybe that's the path for me?
I think it was just how much I loved doing it.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was just the thing that I loved to do.
And how lucky were you to find it?
Right, of course.
Some people our age never find it.
Right, no, absolutely. I have to say, I mean, there's a long story here. There's always a long story about everything. But it was in my blood. Way back when, it wasn't just my dad who had wanted to be a musician and the timing wasn't right. And certainly my dad would have been good enough to be a musician. He was a good enough trumpet player to be a professional trumpet player, for sure. But timing wasn't right. It just wasn't feasible.
Yeah.
But the same was true for my grandfather.
His father.
His father.
Wow.
He wanted to be a violinist. And in fact, here's the story. He wanted to play the violin. He actually worked part of his way through college, University of Chicago, playing violin in movie theaters. But he was going to be drafted. It was World War I. He was going to be drafted. So he signed up for the military, became an aerial photographer. I didn't know any of this until 2005 or something. Wow. So he never told us any of this, but he was a war hero, World War I. And Julius Rozovsky was his name. And when he got back from the war, he had been elected to the state legislature in Missouri first Jewish person to be elected to the state legislature in Missouri. So, jump many years. I was about 12, and he was in very bad shape physically, and would sit on the couch. I'd practice the violin, and he would stay there and just play.
What a great memory.
Yeah, incredible. He would just watch me, and he went downtown even when he was ill, and he bought me way too good of a violin bow and a violin. I still have and use the violin bow. It should have never been bought for a little kid. I didn't realize, I mean, he was just interested and very nice, never said a word about it, positive, negative, just watched. I didn't realize anything about it. He bought me and my brother tickets to go hear Itzhak Perlman play. And the concert was when we were sitting Shiva for him. So, but they insisted that we go because he wanted us to have gone.
Yeah. So that was actually one of my questions, so we'll get right to it at this point. Football players have heroes, economists have heroes, lawyers have heroes. I have Brandeis, etc., Lincoln, all that. You growing up, are there people that you thought, my gosh, if I could ever be like that violinist?
Well, Itzhak Perlman certainly would be one.
Would be one.
Absolutely. Isaac Stern.
Isaac Stern.
We heard.
On the roof.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, incredible. Yeah. But no, we heard him play so many times.
Is that right?
He was soloing with the St. Louis Symphony. Seems like every year, maybe. We heard him all the time.
Yeah. So when you go to hear him, does that just make you think more that this is what I really want to do? To play this thing professionally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a dream,
Yeah.
Really a dream way beyond reality, because Isaac Stern was much bigger than real life. He was a giant.
And Perlman the same.
Perlman the same.
Plus Perlman being the Israeli and being the polio and everything else.
Everything, and also a very, very nice man.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You've met him?
Yeah. Very sweet man.
So you get to Vermont, and you get to Boston, and what is the transition into? Did you think you needed the PhD to move on, or was it just the next natural step?
It wasn't. The doctorate came later.
DMA. I
apologize. Yeah. No, that's okay. But it is what it is. No, I was in Boston freelancing and making my way, and I had good friends there, including James Cook, who I mentioned.
Yes.
He was then living in Boston, and I was playing gigs. And
so when you play a gig, that's not like playing at a rock and roll bar. Where would you play those gigs?
It could have been, because if somebody paid me to do that, I would have done that.
Got it. Yeah. So normally, would that be, where would you have those gigs?
Mostly orchestras. So there was all from let's see, the New Hampshire Symphony and Boston Classical Orchestra and pickup orchestras of all kinds.
Yeah, and you're immersed. You've become immersed in all of that.
Yeah.
And you're probably just so happy.
Oh, it was all right. It was hard. But I had a string quartet, and we were playing a lot, and we played a concert in a big hall in Boston and everything.
Yeah.
But a respected musician, I had by that point decided that ultimately I wanted to play chamber music, and I wanted to be doing that on a college faculty.
And chamber music, is that defined by the era in which the music was made?
No, chamber music differs from orchestral music in that it's one person on a part, and it's not conducted. So string quartets, piano trios.
Got it. There's not a need to have the orchestra behind you?
Yeah, no orchestra involved at all. Just one person on a part.
And how does that decision-making come about?
Well, it was the music literature and the kind of playing that I loved doing the most, that interaction with other players, one-on-one.
Yeah.
It's a very close and intimate kind of communication that doesn't exist in any other way. It's like a conversation, but
Is that right?
it's more profound than any conversation you could ever have when
So
you really know.
The instrument that you were playing then, are you still playing that particular instrument now?
Oh, you mean the same violin?
The violin itself.
No.
Yeah, and so before I get to it matters, the violin matters
Sure.
just as much as the person using it?
You try to find an instrument that really suits you.
And the bow is
really
important
fits.
as well.
Bow is very, very important. Yeah, it's like your hand. It's just an extension of your
Yeah.
hand.
How do you find the one that was right for you?
I'm still searching, but
that's a great answer, by the
it's a
way.
lifelong search.
Is
But
that right?
yeah. But you go play. There are many dealers and there are many collectors, and you go around and you try stuff, and manufacturers, and there's always something new on the horizon, new thing, the latest thing.
So when you're with a quartet or a trio, are there times when you think, I could be with a better group, or these guys are really good and I'm not as good as they are?
Yeah.
Do you have both of those, neither of those?
You don't really think about who's good or not good.
Okay.
I mean, on one side, you always try to play with people who are better than you because they
Right.
make you look great. But
Yeah.
it's when you're in the process of making the music, it's just about the music. It's just about making it.
Wonderful answer.
And you're listening to each other, and you're responding to one another and
Yeah.
reacting. Everybody knows their part and what they're doing, and everybody knows what the others are supposed to do when
Yes.
things are going at their best. And at each moment, it's new invention. It's
So when you're out there on the bema, nobody knows all the hours and hours of making it sound so perfect. Am I overstating the importance of, we just got to keep going at this till we get it right?
it takes a tremendous amount of work to really do very well, and
Yeah.
nobody knows. You see it in the movies, all of a sudden music just erupts out of nowhere. That is not what really happens. That's not real life.
But even for a trio or a quartet, well, 30 years ago, before you even have a PhD, the amount of time and effort and concentration to make the music sound that good is overwhelming, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hours and hours of individual practice every day, and hours and hours of rehearsing and refining, and for the best chamber groups, getting to know one another so that you can react to one another and
Yeah.
know what's to expect, and to be free enough to do things that are interpretive and new and creative on the spot, on the fly.
And that happens.
It definitely happens.
Wow. And there's a great word for that, and that's called trust.
So true. Yeah.
You have to trust who's next to you, to have worked
Right.
as hard as you, to have committed the time and the effort and the expertise. Without the trust, you don't stay together long, I would guess.
No doubt, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe it's in anything that you have to work together on. But when you're up there and people are looking at you and you want to sound your best, you got to trust they're with you.
Yeah, no doubt. Musically, interestingly, there are legendary stories of famous string quartets who maintained their careers together, even despite really personally not liking one another at all. But musically, they were completely unified, completely committed.
Yes.
But they came. It's it could be like a marriage that you can't undo.
Well, the idea is to walk up those steps and perform. You got to love your
Right.
partners, and they got to love you, and you got to know what you're doing
Musically,
musically.
yes.
So as you're proceeding along, maybe you always knew this, when did you think, my God, I'm really good at this. I could pull this off.
Oh, I still don't think so.
Oh, Julian.
Oh yeah, no.
Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. There's always every single day of practicing. There's more to learn. There's more to do. it doesn't ever get easy.
Is that
It's
right?
always complicated. There's always more questions.
So is it always the same music, just in your mind how to play it better? Is that fair?
In some parts of the literature, it's always the same music, but it's also about discovering new music literature and new things to play, and that's part of the thrill of it, is to uncover things that
Yeah.
that people aren't usually playing, or yet another composer who's fantastic that you want to be curious about, or things to present to audiences that they haven't experienced before.
Wow.
That's a whole different way of thinking.
And did you center on Bach, Beethoven, all the other incredibly important people in your line of work? Was there a line that you tried to think would be best for you? Is there such a thing as finding one best for you?
There are for some people, but I'm too easily bored. So I was always looking for something else. Always, and still always looking for the next thing that I'm curious about or intrigued by. So nothing. Right now, it so happens that I am practicing Bach a lot, but I had kind of pulled away from practicing Bach, but I have been lately.
And growing up, is it assumed that you would start with the so-called classical 200 or 300-year music before you can venture out?
It was for me, yeah.
Yeah, you had to learn.
But I don't think there was. So, my dad was a jazz trumpet player. He wrote popular music. He wrote show music, and my brother plays, show music, Broadway music, and popular music on the piano. And my very first actual gig was at a summer concert with Donna Summer.
Oh my
in the
gosh.
background. So not really actually. There was no pressure to do one thing or another. It's just
Yes.
what I was drawn to. I never was drawn to it, unfortunately, probably because of the huge wealth that I was going to amass or fame or any. I just really loved the music and the art of music, and in particular the art of violin playing.
When you play violin, showing my naivete, can you just pick up a viola and play it?
Yes.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Or any other instrument that flows naturally from the violin?
The viola is the most similar.
Okay.
And yes, I can pick one up and just play it, but I wouldn't claim to in any way be a professional player of it.
And what is the difference in the sound that comes from it?
A viola is a fifth lower. It's bigger and lower. And
The instrument physically is bigger.
Yeah. It has a much more kind of deep tenor voice. They play in the clef that they play in on the music is called the alto clef. So they call themselves, altos. But it's a deep, rich, full voice. Very beautiful.
Richer than the violin.
Richer in a certain way. It's a complex quality of sound. There's sounds that complement one another, not exactly the same.
The instrument that how many violins do you own?
How many do I own? But remember that my wife is also a violinist and a violist, so we have a lot of instruments around the house.
Wow.
So I really don't have a good count for you, but there are a lot of violins.
And one favorite?
Well, there's one very good violin that I play on a lot, yes, and that I've had for about 11 years.
And how did you come about that one?
I worked my way up to it. I had various instruments and.
There's a progression.
Yeah, there's a progression. Trading, dealing with dealers, and gradually moving to where I am now. The violin that I used in undergraduate school, which is a very good, we think Czech, we don't know actually exactly who made it, but we think Czech violin, that's what my wife Carol plays on.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was
And
mine.
are those instruments made in America, made in Europe?
That one was made in Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
The violin that I play on primarily these days, well, there are really two violins that I play on primarily. One that I use for everyday playing for teaching lessons and things. It's Chinese.
Wow.
It's a modern Chinese instrument. The other instrument was made in Italy.
So how do we get from Boston to BW?
Well, a very prominent cellist who was administrator at New England Conservatory had a conversation with me. He brought it about, and I said, "What do you want to do? You know, what do you have in mind for your future?" And I said, "I want to be on a college faculty, and I want to play chamber music. I want to be in resident chamber ensemble." And he said, "Well, you're probably 10 years away from that, so keep working."
How old are you then?
I was 23.
Did that anger you when he said that?
It caused me to apply to every open violin position at a university.
Just to show them wrong.
Yeah, and I got a job. So
At BW?
no, at Memphis State University, which is now University of Memphis. So I took a cut in salary from my freelancing and moved to Memphis and taught there for 8 years.
And then to BW?
No, then to my doctorate.
And there was a significant period of time here.
Yeah. So I was 8 years at Memphis, and then moved to New Jersey.
To Rutgers.
To Rutgers University, and
so explain, Dr. Fernandez gets a PhD in economics.
yes,
It's economics, and I'm guessing that he wrote a book about economics. How does one attain a DMA from master's to DMA? What is that process like?
well, I told you it doesn't mean anything. You didn't believe me. You go to school. So I took another cut and pay from Memphis, and I went to a fellowship at Rutgers University.
Okay.
And I taught some lessons to undergraduate students while I practiced very hard and played in some orchestras around the New York City area, and played at parties or whatever opportunities there were to earn some money. And I studied with a very famous violinist named Arnold Steinhardt there, one of the most famous American violinists.
Wow.
First violinist of the Guarneri Quartet for many years. And he came every couple of weeks to New Brunswick, to Rutgers, and taught a fairly small group of students, and learned a great deal from him at that time. And we had coursework to do. I had to study counterpoint, which I had never studied before.
Which is?
And that's how notes work together
Wow.
again, with one another.
Yeah.
And took some history classes and interesting courses on historical practice in music, 18th century historical practice.
Yeah.
And had to give lecture recitals, and as part of the degree you had to give a certain number of recitals, programs that were juried by faculty, and a lecture recital, and you had to write some papers and do a mock audition, and all manner of hoops that they had set up to cause you to improve, learn things.
So I should have asked you this question earlier, but maybe this is the right time. Were you nervous standing up there, either in Boston or Memphis or Rutgers, or maybe even earlier, on your feet? Were you nervous?
Every time, of course.
Every time.
Still to this day.
You're Barbra Streisand. Every time you're nervous.
Of course.
Is that
Yeah.
right? Even
think,
as accomplished and natural as it comes to you, you're nervous.
yeah, I think everybody is. I don't know, I shouldn't say everybody, but it's natural. You work really hard on something and you get ready to do it, and now it's the moment of truth, and you have to do it.
No matter how much you're prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it not true if you're just public speaking, if you just, any other time?
Well, we've both been doing our craft for a long time.
Yeah.
Many people say that they're nervous to the first moment it starts. And then because you've put the work in, it's so natural to rise to the level of expertise. And then maybe you're exhausted when it's finished, but the performance itself, you're so prepared for or so expert at, you can get through that just on that basis. Is that fair in your line of work?
I think that, well, you focus. You get so
focus.
focused on it
Yeah.
that you set aside those other feelings.
Yes.
But it's not that they aren't there. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm not nervous. It's that I've got to. You kind of learn. You train yourself to focus in, to concentrate.
And so, looking back on things, no one, from a layman's standpoint, would know during Cold Nidre if you missed a note. We wouldn't know if we missed a note. Are there times when your mind's even thinking while you're playing, ugh, I didn't get that one, I missed something, or are you just so, do you ever think about that? I missed something?
It's a great question, because you have to not let yourself, there's almost no phrase when you wouldn't like to have done it better.
Is that right?
Oh yeah. So, but you can't let yourself second guess constantly. You have to go forward.
Yeah.
And you have to think about how you're going to communicate about the next thing that's coming. And also you're thinking about how what you're playing now fits into this larger whole, the architecture of the entire work. And you can't allow yourself to dwell on some past detail that you have no control over. It's past, after all. You can't,
Quickly.
You can't, very quickly.
Instantaneously, it's over.
You can't fix it. So that's another thing that you learn to do, is to not dwell on past mishaps.
Can you teach that?
You try.
I mean, well, I guess the better question is, did someone teach you how to do that, or does it just happen over time?
I think that's really experience.
Yeah.
But people talk about it. I mean, we all, as musicians, all talk to one another and to their students and to their teachers about dealing with nerves and dealing with being on the stage and being in front of people.
Yeah.
And how to prepare. That's what practicing is all about, is preparing to do this thing, which is to perform. So definitely part of it is preparing yourself emotionally, not just...
So when you're in your quartet, and let's just say you're at BW and you're playing, do you think, well, let's ask the better question. Do you look out and think, are they bored? Are they listening to me? Do you take anything from the audience from the beginning to the end of the performance?
So there are times when you feel that you're getting feedback from an audience.
Really?
You do. There are times when that happens. They're great moments when.
Yeah.
But there are other times when you don't, and what really matters is the interaction with the other musicians on the stage, and that's great enough. They're just once in a while, in certain settings. So on a concert stage. So I'm no longer on the faculty of Baldwin Wallace, but gave well over 100 concerts there.
Wow.
And we had two kind of formats, I would say. One was on the stage with the audience out there in the hall. But we also did concerts where we invited the audience to sit in seats on the stage with us.
Oh my gosh.
And those performances, you got much, much more feedback from the audience. And that maybe the proximity, and that you remove the distance this is the stage and that's the audience. But now everybody is here and we're making You're almost, as an audience member, you're almost part of the music making. And in those situations, then you get a different feeling with the audience. And that's, chamber music is that kind of human interaction. That's what it's really all about. That's why I love it so much.
And that's what drew you to that as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Just the feeling of the love for it.
So in the summers at the Yellow Barn Festival, those 11 summers, it was in a barn. The concerts were in a barn, and the audience would literally be sitting with their feet up on the stage.
Oh my God!
You know, and there'd be an audience in the hayloft up.
Oh my God!
there.
It's quite a barn.
And yeah, it was a wonderful place.
It brings a smile to your face.
Oh yeah, it was nothing like it. But there, you always felt you were interacting with the audience. You absolutely always did.
Let's say a student comes to BW. They're not at Oberlin, they're not at Berkeley, they're not somewhere else. They're at Baldwin Wallace in the musical school. Let's go to both ends of that. The next question: are there some that you hear you think, "Oh my gosh, what a talent," or okay, they're gonna probably hope their economics degrees gets them through. Do you get both of those and everything in between?
Yes, sure.
You do.
Sure, but if you go to music school and you major in music performance,
Okay.
never mind music education, music therapy, that are more professional training situations where you know what the job is, you don't know what you're going to do as a music performer when you start undergraduate school. You have to know that you love doing that so much that you have to have an education in it, that you must do this.
Yeah.
And otherwise, probably you shouldn't. Because there are no promises of any kind of career as a performing musician. There's no guarantees. There's nothing even close to a guarantee, and it doesn't matter how talented you are. It doesn't matter.
There's a little bit of luck, timing.
There's a huge amount of luck. There are, now wait a minute, there are Itzhak Perlmans. There are Yo-Yo Ma's. That's a different territory.
Yeah.
That's different territory. Their career was off and running. They were obviously going to be astonishing world-class musicians before they would have ever entered college. Different class of thing entirely.
Well, and that's in any line of work. Or there's actors who, Leonardo DiCaprio, you could tell he was probably going to be a really superstar. We could go through all those names. But it is interesting to have them come in as 18 and 19-year-olds with so much similar passion to what you had. They love the instrument.
Right.
And they're accomplished enough to get in, but they're still relatively foggy on what leads next.
Right.
Is that fair?
It's fair. And part of talent, because you described, you said, well, they're so talented. Well, what is talent? Part of talent got to do with work ethic.
Yeah.
Part of talent has to do with the sheer force of will to stick it out, to persevere, and to say, it's going to be hard for a while.
And some college students, their mind wanders, their eyes wander, and before you know it, either their major changes or other interests just come into play.
Yeah.
As much as their parents may want them to be at the New York Philharmonic, they're not going to get there.
Not going to, right, absolutely.
But it must feel like anybody of a professorial status to watch the growth of a four-year music student.
It can be totally thrilling.
Thrilling.
And not just through the 4 years, but after. So we stay in touch with our students long after and see how they evolve as artists or what else they do in their lives. And they get married, they have families, they build careers. It's because being a musical artist, being a musician is about the whole person. It's not just about
what a great point.
wiggling your fingers.
and they continue to play and want to continue to learn.
Sure. That's part of it. You never
And
stop.
So my guess is you'll probably not agree with me, but some of that you instilled in these students as a professor. Please say yes.
I hope so.
I think it's fair to say that not just because of you, but it must be very gratifying to think that you played a role in forming somebody's future, not just in music.
Yeah, I guess so. Thank you. Yes, I guess. I hope so. Those relationships, a lot of them are lifelong relationships.
Yeah.
And you hear back from them. It is very gratifying to know that they're successful, and I hope that some of those things that are important to them and that they learn to value and that
So,
continues.
moving on to a different subject. Musicians today playing your instrument, who do you think takes the instrument to a level others dream about getting to?
There are many fantastic
Is that right?
players. There are many, and it is a global phenomenon, to point at one person is in a way, or even a few people, is in a way unreasonable. I would say that there's a violinist who was here recently, Augustine Hodelick, who was soloed with the Cleveland Orchestra recently, who is a truly profound artist.
And what's the difference between that person and others who aren't quite there? Is it just the effort? What brings that person out of the group?
In his case, so I don't know him. I mean, I haven't met him. I only watched him. I heard him play down at Severance Hall. But
Yeah.
I think he's very generous. I think he is really giving very generously of his art.
So you just said going to Severance. So a layman who couldn't play a trumpet,
Yeah.
and do you hear the music differently than I do? You must.
I think musicians hear differently than.
Yeah, you must.
Yes. I mean, if you talk to neuroscientists about that, they'll tell you that they can measure it. So, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's. We're trained to hear it differently. We hear a whole different set of details.
And you want to. Don't you want to hear it?
Yes, but I also wish that I could ever revisit the thrill of hearing the 40th Mozart Symphony again for the first time, or the 6th Tchaikovsky Symphony again for the first time, because that I can never experience.
And are those, not just those two pieces, are those always on your mind, always in your brain? You listen to them frequently?
I don't listen to them frequently. No, I mean, I know them. They're in there.
Yeah. So that raises a really interesting question. Before we talk about Kol Nidre, when you play something that may last 40 minutes, how do they do that without the music in front of them? Is it just love and work?
You train yourself to memorize.
Yeah.
That's part of the process, part of how you practice, part of how you learn to play reliably. You train the memory. And one of the really big talents that you speak about, musical talent, that may be imponderable if you don't have it, is the ability to remember how something goes in your head. So and the ability to play it even if you didn't ever have the music there. So to play by ear, in other words.
Wow.
So memorization is a big thing, a big issue for musicians, and it's something that makes people very nervous if they have to perform from memory and they're not used to doing it often. But we use our visual memory, how does it look on the page? So you might have a piece of music that's 30 pages long, not surprisingly.
Wow.
And so you kind of get a feeling, just as if you remember how it was in school, you can remember the teacher writing on the blackboard how it would look. There's that part of your memory.
Wow.
There's that aural part, like I said, that you remember how it goes, and you can play it by ear. And then there's a kinesthetic part. There's how your hands feel, how it physically feels to do it, and your muscles literally learn their way. You're counting on all of that to combine to remember. And we do it even whether the music is in front of us or not, we're relying on those things. Because there's a lot to remember.
Seems like the violin becomes part of you.
Like I said, the bow is an extension of your hand, and the instrument is like your voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can enter that sphere because you love what you're doing.
When you're at your best, you want the instrument to literally be like your own voice.
And if you're looking, and I don't know the eras here, if you look at some of the music you just mentioned, and music that's older, and music that's newer, is it different music because it's older?
Well, the style's changed. Musical
changed.
fashion changed, sure.
Huh.
And people might think that people have this idea that things develop and get better and better and better as history goes.
Okay.
But that, of course, is not true. So, there's great music from the 17th and 18th century,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty undistinguished music from the 21st century. So, but styles and fashion, and that's one of the things. If you study music history in college, in a way, what you're doing is you're following the trends as musical fashion changes, and it's impacted by the society and the culture around it. You think about how probably everybody is familiar with how the music in the 60s was influenced by the social change in the 60s and popular music. But that's been true of art music all along, throughout history. So Beethoven was highly influenced by Napoleon, and then he got really mad at Napoleon and wrote music that wasn't so influenced by Napoleon. Musicians always had heroes. Mozart's father, Leopold, our famous Mozart, Wolfgang, his father, Leopold, was a court musician, worked within the court system, and was basically a peasant servant in a court, and Wolfgang didn't fit well. He was part of this age of enlightenment, this change where people were saying, well, I don't think I'm a peasant, I think I'm equal.
Yeah. And how about the Russian Tchaikovsky and all them? Did they have the influence of what was going on in the society they lived in?
To a huge degree.
Yeah.
To a huge degree.
Yeah.
Tchaikovsky, of course, we don't know everything, but we think he dealt with being gay in a society where being gay was most not
They'd shoot you.
tolerated. Yeah, it wasn't allowed. But sure, think about Shostakovich and the incredible political implications of the music that he wrote. On the other hand, at the same time, there were, so maybe you're familiar with Huberman, the violinist.
Tell us.
Huberman was one of the people who helped musicians during Nazi times escape to Israel. And they formed an orchestra in Israel. And Huberman was a very prominent violinist. And some of the German musicians cooperated with the Nazis, and some didn't. And those who didn't were ostracized, and the Jews, of course, they had to leave or they were dead. But they were all, there was a great deal of music highly impacted by that scenario.
So in the time remaining, I may switch gears a little bit. Opera. Do you like hearing the human voice? Because I'm assuming in your little 3 and 4 groups, there's no human voice. What do you
Not very
think
often,
about,
yeah.
about the human voice and, of course, the quality and the story they're trying to tell versus your music?
So what's interesting there, probably, maybe, is that we as string players are always trying to imitate the human voice. And vocalists are always telling me, oh, we're trying to imitate the string players. So we're listening to each other, learning from each other.
Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So the greatest singer for any violinist, if you want to play the violin really, really well and you want to listen to a singer and imitate it, it's Ella Fitzgerald.
Scat.
No? Not necessarily. Well, scat is wonderful,
Yeah.
but just the way that she makes a phrase, just the way that she uses consonants and vowels and shapes of sounds and volumes and even pitch, because she had incredible intonation. Just the way she produces a phrase of music, we should imitate that. Also, the natural quality of her voice. It's not artificial in any way. It's just totally a natural voice.
And that would be a voice, I think it's fair to say, that you would listen to differently than a layman.
Probably so. Probably so.
And those, I mean, you think of the era in which she lived, being a black woman,
Absolutely.
and those eras in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, she wasn't staying at the Waldorf Astoria.
Not only was she a black woman, she was a woman in a world of men. Jazz, I mean, it was men.
Men.
But that's the way. One of the things that my very frequent playing partner, Bob Marovich, is a pianist I play with all the time. One of the things that we've enjoyed doing is uncovering music composed by women from many centuries that is almost entirely neglected. Nobody pays any attention to that music.
And it's probably incredible music.
Beautiful music, beautiful music.
Yeah.
But
Is that redundant to say beautiful music? Isn't all music beautiful?
it's not redundant to me. There's a lot of music that's not so beautiful. Probably, just like you asked how we hear things differently, a musician from someone who just likes music. Probably I'm much more alarmed by really bad sounding music, and I probably find things really bad that other people wouldn't be so bothered by.
Yeah. So when you hear, does that transform to, gosh, the Beatles sounded good in the 60s, and you would think, well, they would sound better if they did this. How about just a harmonizing of John, Paul, George, and Ringo? Just simply that. Is there criticism that came to you right away, even for something as huge as them?
It makes no sense to criticize it.
Okay.
And there's not. First of all, it's not my area. You know,
Okay.
I'm not a specialist
that isn't
there.
why I asked. But I'm
but
just wondering about you listening to different music.
Yeah, I mean, criticize isn't exactly the thing. One makes observations
Got it.
about something, but it isn't necessarily positive or negative. It's just, this is what it is.
Yeah.
But you can't, the Beatles were a phenomenon.
Yes.
So it wasn't just honestly, it wasn't just the music. It was the whole culture around them. And they happened to land in this spot where here they were the perfect thing for the perfect time.
Yes.
And was it absolutely perfect? Well, sure.
So that leads me to where I think we should go next, and that is the popularity of what you do. Is it something you think about, that your line of work, your work itself, is it worry you or just disappoint you that it never got to the popularity of, in this country, jazz or something else. Think about that for a moment, would you?
Sort of disappointing, but there's no surprise there. It's nothing new. So there has always been popular music that was embraced by more people, and then more music that was of more intellectual nature that is followed by a smaller group. And that still exists. It not so different. Jazz, by the way, is equally unpopular to classical music. And I think that is, in a way, a compliment, because it doesn't give in. It's an art form
All in itself.
and it doesn't give in to the need to have commercial appeal necessarily.
When you were a student, what was the percentage male-female
In college?
in college?
Many more female than male, but not as many more female than male as now. But I don't know the percentage.
So there's even more female now?
Yeah. There's a lot more women in music schools than men in music schools.
Have any theory as to why that happens?
None that's worthwhile to, worthy of saying, because I don't know.
So your wife is an accomplished all in and of herself.
Absolutely, yes.
And she plays both instruments.
Plays violin and viola. She has her master's degree is in viola, and her undergraduate degree is in violin.
And your children play?
They both play the cello.
And tell us where they are in their educational pursuits.
They are, older one is going to finish a degree in physics and cello this
Physics and cello.
spring. Yeah, in May, I guess.
Where is she?
At Baldwin Wallace.
Okay.
And the younger one is getting a degree in psychology and music theory, also at Baldwin Wallace, and has 2 more years of school after this year.
So your older daughter, 4 or 5 months from now, is there a T in the road? I'm either going to go to the musical side or stay on the science side?
I think the plan is to stay on the science side, but not completely lose the music side.
You never lose the music side. Right?
Yeah.
Once you've given as much time as I'm sure both of your children have, it's
Right.
with you for life, and it's in your
Right.
house.
It's and they love playing. They
Yeah.
love their instruments and they love playing them, and that won't go away.
Yeah.
It'll. One hopes. I've known many amateur musicians who played beautifully and remained active, but sometimes you move away from it because of where your professional life takes you, and you have to have work ethic there. You have to be committed
Yes.
to that. But very often they find their way back later in life.
And they were always into string, or was there a piano in your home growing up?
We have a piano. It doesn't get played on that
It's
much.
just-
They have piano lessons.
Yes.
And we wanted them both to play, violin like us, but they insisted on playing something else, which
Maybe
was
because
probably,
sometimes kids just don't want to do everything their parents ask of them.
I think it was very smart. Very
It was.
smart. Yeah, sure.
So let's finish with talking about how most of our congregants see you. And that is in the evening hours, late September or the first week of October, on what I would guess the rabbi would say was maybe our most important night of the year here. And you come out either with your daughters or your wife or all 4 of you or just you, and you play for Kol Nidre. How important is that to your yearly work?
That's what an interesting way of asking. It's not particularly important at all to my yearly work.
Okay.
But it's an extremely meaningful piece of music. And,
Is that right?
And it's an extremely, of course, one of the most meaningful prayers.
Yes.
And one of the most complicated prayers.
Is
And
that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And how long have can you guess how long you've been playing it?
I've been playing it since I was in high school.
Wow.
When I was on the faculty in Memphis, I was invited every year back to the temple where I grew up, which is Temple Israel in St. Louis, and I played Kol Nidre there. In high school, Max Rabinowitz played the Kol Nidre for Temple Israel in St. Louis, and he was concertmaster of St. Louis Symphony, a member of the congregation there. So I have memories of him doing that, and
Wow.
of course I had the music, and I learned to play it, and so I always played it.
Did you like to play it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's pretty complicated. The
Well,
whole thing.
all we can
the
tell
Kol Nidre.
is that you're, like probably everything else you do, you're engrossed in it. Right?
It's-
I mean,
yeah.
we get to see you, talk about people being 5 feet away. The choir is a foot away, and the rabbi, and we're all here. And it's thrilling. You should know how thrilling it is for us to watch you, not just listen, but watch.
Well, thank you.
And I'm sure
thank
you
so
know
much.
that. It's incredible to watch someone of a specific talent playing something very difficult that they've played all their life, and to hear it as well as it comes out from you.
Well, thank you. I truly appreciate it. It's very, very personal.
Yeah.
That piece is very, very personal.
Yeah.
And I must say, when I'm playing it, I rarely say this, but I'll say it.
Go ahead.
Why not? It's the one time when I'm thrown back to that, when I was 12 years old and my grandfather was listening to me play.
Yeah.
That's the one time. He had wanted it so much, and there it was.
is.
And around 2005, I found out totally by accident, doing research with a student and something else. There was my grandfather's name on a violin recital program in St. Louis, playing a really hard piece.
Yeah.
And then I had never known why he was so interested
Yes.
in it. But so no, I feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that piece connecting me to my tradition, my
And
past.
is it fair to assume that all during your career, when that happens, when you are, to use your word, when you are drawn to a piece of music, that's when you're at your happiest? When the music just becomes part of you. Yes?
Almost. Almost. I think maybe I'm at my happiest when my kids are.
Of course. Yeah.
So
yeah.
no, 'cause
I didn't mean to say, that's very
yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's for me, honestly, it's been my job. It's been my profession. Maybe if you had asked me that when I was 20 years old, I would have said absolutely for sure that that's true. That if I heard the Dvorak cello concerto, that there was nothing else more important or meaningful than
Yes.
that moment.
Yes.
But now it's bigger
Yeah.
than that.
It's better.
Yeah, it's much broader. It's much richer.
It's more
much deeper.
heart-filling. Yeah, you'll love it even more.
Yeah. Oh, I would say I value it even more.
And that's what a musician does for everybody else, is that we get to listen and feel and observe your love of what you're playing.
Nice to
We're the
know.
lucky ones.
That's very nice to know.
Isn't that, but that's consistent with what a musician does. You surely play for yourself, but you're much more fulfilled when you finish Kol Nidre and everybody goes, wow.
Oh, well, that's very nice. I truly appreciate your saying.
And I'm telling you, in all the years I've heard you play it, I wouldn't know whether you were wrong at all. And
Usually wrong. Yeah, usually wrong.
But we all take that, wow, moment. And the rabbi sits and we don't jump right up right away. We fill ourselves with it.
But that's that. It happens to be that piece.
And it happens to be the performance, but yes,
It's
you
so,
can agree to that.
Yeah, it's so much more because of it's Kol Nidre. We're forgiving ourselves. We're sitting
Yeah.
there trying to say we have not been perfect, but we can forgive ourselves.
Yeah. And on that note, I got to thank you for a wonderful hour.
Oh, thank
You've
you.
been a
It's
great
fun.
guest, and I appreciate you being here.
Very,
And
very
we'll be
fun to
back
talk.
next week. Next week, we're going to talk to the rabbi, Rabbi Rachel Brown. Thank you very much.
Thank you.